My mother looked me dead in the eye at my college graduation, surrounded by hundreds of people, and said, "It's a shame your face will always hold you back from real success."
She thought she was breaking me.
Instead, she handed me my freedom. That same afternoon, I packed a single duffel bag, took the $355 I had saved from working late-night diner shifts, and cut all contact. I swore I'd never look back. For 12 years, she thought I was starving on the street, begging for her approval. But today, 12 years later, she's sitting in my corporate lobby waiting for a loan to save her home, completely unaware that the CEO whose mercy she's begging for is the daughter she called ugly. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my voice has reached. My name is Claire, and I'm 34 years old today. But to truly understand how I ended up sitting behind a heavy mahogany desk in a high-rise office building, holding my mother's financial life in my hands, you have to go back to the day I stood on the college lawn in a navy blue cap and gown. My mother, Evelyn, had spent my entire upbringing obsessed with surface appearances. To her, a woman's value was directly tied to how effortlessly stunning she looked, how pristine her social standing was, and how easily she could charm the people around her. I, on the other hand, was always the quiet, bookish daughter who preferred studying finance over sitting in beauty salons. Throughout my childhood, her subtle digs were constant, but graduation day was supposed to be different. I was graduating cum laude with a degree in economics, paying for every single credit hour myself through late-night shifts at a local diner. Yet, as my classmates laughed and snapped photos with their families, Evelyn smoothed her silk dress, looked down her nose at me, and uttered those cold words in front of my friends and their parents. She said it with a soft, fake smile, as if she were giving me helpful advice. "It's a shame your face will always hold you back from real success. You just don't have the look for the real world, Claire." Something inside me, a thread that had been pulled tight for 22 years, snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply looked at her, handed her my framed diploma casing, and turned around. That afternoon, while my family waited at a restaurant where I was supposed to meet them for dinner, I was already back in my tiny rental room. I packed one single duffel bag with essential clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, and my notebooks. I emptied my secret savings tin, $355 in crumpled $20 bills and loose change, earned from tips at the diner. I bought a one-way Greyhound bus ticket to Chicago, leaving behind my phone, my old life, and every single person connected to Evelyn. The bus ride was long, cold, and terrifying. When I stepped off into the bustling streets of a city where no one knew my name, reality hit me like a wall of ice. $355 does not stretch far in a major city. For the first 2 weeks, I slept on a worn-out couch in a cramped apartment shared with 3 strangers I met on a community bulletin board. My daily meals consisted of cheap instant noodles and discounted bread. I walked miles every single day to save on bus fare, applying for every entry-level position I could find. My phone buzzed constantly during those first few days with panicked texts and angry voicemails from extended relatives, aunts and cousins calling me ungrateful, demanding I return home, and apologize to my mother for making a scene by skipping dinner. I turned the phone off, took out the SIM card, and threw it into a trash can near the bus station. I refused to let their noise pull me back into the dark. My hunger wasn't just physical. It was an overwhelming drive to prove that my mind was worth 1,000 times more than the superficial standard Evelyn held over me. Within 3 weeks, I secured 2 jobs, a graveyard shift entering data for an overnight logistics company, and a morning role as a junior clerk at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm. I slept 4 hours a night. I spent every spare moment reading financial reports, studying market trends, and mastering investment portfolio strategies. At the real estate firm, I made myself indispensable. While other junior clerks did the bare minimum, I stayed late to analyze defaulted loans and property valuation models. My supervisor, a blunt, brilliant woman named Eleanor, noticed my work. She didn't care about makeup, designer clothes, or social grace. She cared about sharp, uncompromising results. Eleanor took me under her wing, pushing me to lead complex asset restructuring projects. Under her mentorship, I spent the next 8 years transforming from a quiet survivor into a formidable force in private equity. I earned my master's degree through night classes, saved every penny I didn't need for basic living, and eventually partnered with Eleanor to launch our own boutique asset management firm specializing in distressed property acquisition and corporate debt recovery. By 32, I was the managing director and principal owner. I built a life of quiet luxury and total independence, completely invisible to the people from my past. Meanwhile, back in my hometown, the golden veneer of Evelyn's world was quietly shattering. Through occasional public filings and distant industry chatter, I knew that Evelyn's lavish lifestyle had always been built on a foundation of sand. My late father had left behind a modest manufacturing business, which Evelyn took over despite having zero financial acumen. Rather than investing in modernizing the company, she spent years siphoning its capital to fund expensive vacations, country club memberships, and high-end home renovations just to maintain appearances for her social circle. She ran the business on high-interest commercial credit and predatory loans, constantly refinancing to cover previous debts. For 12 years, she operated on borrowed time and borrowed money. But economic shifts and rising interest rates eventually closed every exit route she had. When a major supplier canceled their contract due to unpaid invoices, the house of cards collapsed entirely. Her personal residence, the grand four-bedroom house she used as her primary status symbol, was put up as collateral for a massive emergency loan. By the time 12 years had passed since the day she humiliated me at graduation, Evelyn was completely broke, facing immediate foreclosure, and facing the total liquidation of her assets. She was desperate, knocking on the door of every private lender in the state to find someone willing to bail her out. That brings us to 3 weeks ago, when a standard commercial loan application landed on my desk. My firm handles high-risk debt restructuring, meaning we buy or fund distressed assets that traditional banks refuse to touch. As I flipped through the file marked urgent refinancing request, my heart stopped for a brief second. There, stamped on the top of the financial disclosures, was my mother's name, Evelyn Whitaker. Attached was a photo of her primary property, along with a desperate plea for an emergency loan of $400,000 to prevent immediate foreclosure and public auction. According to the file, every major bank had turned her down. My firm was her absolute last resort. She had submitted the application through a broker, completely unaware of who owned the parent company overseeing the fund. My loan officers were ready to reject it automatically. The risk profile was terrible, and the borrower had no viable income stream.
But I stopped them.
I told my team that I would handle this specific file personally. I instructed my secretary to schedule an in-person final approval interview at our headquarters. I wanted Evelyn to come to my office, believing she was meeting a senior male executive named Mr. Vance, the pseudonym I used for high-level fund approvals. The morning of the meeting, I dressed with deliberate precision. I wore a tailored dark navy suit, minimal jewelry, and pulled my hair back into a clean, professional style. I sat behind my desk in the corner executive suite, looking out over the Chicago skyline. When my secretary escorted Evelyn into the room, I watched her through the glass partitions before she stepped inside. Age and stress had finally caught up with her. The pristine, untouchable socialite was gone. In her place was a woman wearing an old designer coat that had seen better days, her posture tense, her hands clutching her designer handbag like a lifeline. She walked into the office with a practiced, nervous smile, looking around for the powerful man she thought she was meeting. "Mr. Vance?" she asked softly, looking right past me toward the second desk in the room. "Mr. Vance isn't handling your file, Evelyn," I said, my voice calm, flat, and completely steady. "I am." She turned toward me, frowning in confusion. For 5 long seconds, she stared at my face. I could see the gears turning in her head as she tried to reconcile the confident, impeccably dressed 34-year-old CEO sitting before her with the shy, plain girl she had dismissed 12 years ago on a college lawn. "Claire," she whispered, her voice dropping an octave as her face drained of color. Is that really you?" "It's Claire," I replied, leaning back in my chair and opening her financial portfolio on my desk. "Take a seat." She stood frozen for a moment before stepping forward, her hands trembling as she sat in the chair across from me. Tears instantly welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of joy or maternal warmth. They were the desperate, panicked tears of a woman who realized her fate rested in the hands of the person she had treated like garbage. "Claire, oh my goodness, I've been looking for you for years," she began, her tone instantly shifting into a dramatic performance of maternal devotion. "You just vanished. You broke my heart, leaving like that. Do you have any idea how much sleepless night I suffered worrying about you?" "Save it, Evelyn," I interrupted, raising a single hand. "You didn't look for me. You called my relatives to complain about how embarrassing it was that I didn't show up to dinner. You never cared where I went, as long as my absence didn't spoil your social reputation." Her artificial warmth evaporated, replaced by a defensive flash in her eyes. "I was your mother. I raised you. Whatever I said to you back then, I said it to make you tough. I knew the world was cruel, Claire. I was just trying to prepare you." "You didn't prepare me," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "You tried to destroy my confidence, so I would stay small, quiet, and dependent on you. You told me my face would prevent me from ever succeeding. But it wasn't my face that built this company. It was the brain you ignored and the work ethic you tried to diminish." Evelyn swallowed hard, her eyes darting down to the thick red folder sitting directly under my hands. The reality of her situation crashed back over her. She knew that if she left this room without a signed commitment, sheriff deputies would post a foreclosure notice on her front door by Friday. Her pride was warring with her absolute desperation. "Please, Claire," she whispered, dropping the defensive act entirely, her voice cracking with real terror. "I have nowhere else to go. They're going to take the house. They're going to take everything. If the papers publish the auction notice, I'll be ruined. Everyone will know. You have millions here. You can save me with a single signature. I'm your mother." I looked down at the documents. Part of me, the hurt, 22-year-old girl who had spent freezing nights on a transit bus with $300 to her name, wanted to slide the folder into the shredder right in front of her. It would have been so easy to order security to escort her out of the building and watch her lose everything she had used to lord over others. But as I stared at her, trembling and pathetic across the desk, I realized something profound. If I acted out of petty cruelty, I was still letting her control my actions. I was still letting her dictate who I was. I didn't need to destroy her to prove my worth. My success had already done that. I picked up my pen. "I am not going to give you a handout, Evelyn," I said clearly. "And I am not going to sign this $400,000 predatory loan. If I sign this as it's written, you'll default in 6 months and lose the house anyway." She gasped, her face falling. "So you're saying no?" "No," I replied, pulling a separate legal draft from my drawer. "My firm will buy the mortgage directly from your bank. We will pay off your high-interest debts. In exchange, the deed to the house transfers to my asset group today. You will be allowed to live in the house as a tenant, paying a strict, fair monthly rent that fits your actual pension income. If you miss a single payment, the lease is terminated and the house will be sold. You will no longer own a status symbol, but you will have a roof over your head." She stared at me, dumbfounded. You want me to pay rent on my own home?" "To your company. It's not your home anymore, Evelyn. It's an asset owned by my firm," I said, sliding the contract across the polished mahogany desk toward her. "Those are my terms. You have 5 minutes to sign, or you can walk out that door and let the bank proceed with the public auction on Friday." Her hands shook violently as she picked up the pen. She looked at the document, then up at me, at the daughter she had written off as worthless 12 years ago. With no options left and her vanity completely broken, she pressed the pen to the paper and signed her name on every line. When she finished, I pulled the documents back, checked the signatures, and placed them neatly in my drawer. I didn't offer a hug. I didn't invite her to dinner. I didn't ask about the relatives who had turned their backs on me. "My legal team will handle all future communication regarding your lease payments," I said, standing up to signal that the meeting was over. "You will never call my personal line, and you will never visit this office again. We are business partners now, nothing more." Evelyn stood up slowly, holding her purse against her chest. She looked like she wanted to say something, to reach for some crumb of familial connection, but the cold, professional wall I had built was impenetrable. She simply bowed her head, turned around, and walked out of the executive suite, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor until the heavy doors closed behind her. As I sat back down in my chair and looked out over the city, a deep, quiet peace settled over my chest. The pain of that graduation day, the cold nights in Chicago, and the years of self-doubt completely evaporated. I hadn't just survived with $355, I had forged a life built on strength, intellect, and self-respect that no one could ever take away from me. True beauty and real power aren't found in a mirror or in the shallow approval of people who only value appearances. They are found in the resilience to walk away from toxic places, the courage to build yourself from nothing, and the dignity to hold your head high when life forces you to stand alone. How would you have handled sitting across that desk? Would you have helped her, or would you have walked away entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.